Creating a productive and beautiful container garden is easy to do. And one thing we can say with certainty, you do not need a lot of room to grow a lot of fresh, delicious organic produce. Plus, adding containers to any area filled with annual and perennial flowers will add extra beauty and interest for you and lots of beneficial wildlife. Today, I'll show you some helpful tips to keep in mind when setting up your next container garden. Now, while it's true you can use just about any type of container for your plantings, it's a great opportunity to take your time and really make an awesome design statement. But you don't have to spend a lot of money on a container either. You could recycle something unusual, like a wooden crate or even an old dresser drawer. Of course, this would give you an eclectic look, but if that's what you're looking for, well, then it's all about thinking outside the box, or in this case, the pot. But if money is no object, you have a lot of options there too, like these imported handmade terracotta pots. Some of them are local, but they're all handmade. A little more money for that, but they're certainly worth it. Now, you and I probably grew up with these terracotta pots. Very inexpensive, maybe $1 or $2, and they come in all different sizes. Now, the downside of this is they have a tendency to crack. So over a year or two, that'll happen, but you can make it last a little bit longer if you would just bring them in over winter or don't plant into them over the winter time. Probably get an extra year or two that way. The other downside about terracotta clay is that they really wick away the moisture, so you have to be extra vigilant to keep these hydrated. Otherwise, your plants will get very dry very quickly. Now, I love this terracotta look and I love a big pot, but with that extra size, you get a lot more weight. So unless that pot is going to be parked in one place, these don't become all that practical. But if you like that look, for a fraction of the weight, hello plastic. Now, plastic has come a long way in recent years to give you any type of shape and any kind of look at a fraction of the cost. And for under $30, you get that right here with a terracotta design and look. Also with plastic, you can get like a hand-spun clay look. This is about $20, but I really like this, and you can't tell that it's plastic. That's the best part about it. Now, to plastic's credit, besides its cost, it's very low there. This does a good job of actually holding in the moisture. So although it's always important to check the moisture in a container, this doesn't wick away water like the terracotta would. If you really like that shiny ceramic look like I do, well then these are the ones you want to go with. Now, there's no way to know from a distance that this is not ceramic. In fact, once again, plastic. So super light, and yet you can get a huge pot in awesome colors. These are under $30. And of course, there's smaller options as well, and they're going to cost you less. If you like the look of metal, well, there's options for that. And again, this is plastic, but you have a different shape here, lots of different sizes, and again, very inexpensive. Now, one of my favorite options in recent years, these eco pots. Now, they also come in different shapes and sizes, but they're made of renewable, sustainable crops. They'll last for a few years. You can either plant right into them or drop a pot inside of it. In a couple years, when these start to break down, rather than throw them in the trash, you throw them in your compost pile and let them break down there. I like that option. Now, in all cases, pots need drainage. And when you buy a plastic one, chances are they're not going to have a drainage hole in them. So you've got to make sure that you do that. So get a big drill bit, drill several holes into this, because plants cannot live in standing water, so you got to provide that drainage. Other common options for containers include concrete. It's a great look, lasts forever, but the heaviest of all options. Styrofoam is another option that's becoming less common, but it mimics the look of concrete or stone, but without all the weight. Metal is another great look, but even galvanized products should be lined with plastic to avoid eventual rusting. And wire baskets lined with coconut husk are popular, inexpensive, and reusable, but they do tend to dry out in windy conditions, so place them where they can be watered easily. An important consideration with any container is the soil, and you have a lot of choices. Now, you might be inclined to just go out in the backyard and dig up what's there, and I can't blame you for that, being a good steward and reusing what you have, but don't do it with your outdoor soil. Now, this might be great for your trees and your shrubs, but it's just too heavy for containers, and it's all about the drainage, and this isn't going to do it. Okay, so we go to the garden center or nursery, and we're looking at the myriad of choices, and undoubtedly you're going to see topsoil. That's what it's called. And at $2 a bag, it's a great deal. But you know what it's best for? Outdoor use, to add bulk to outdoor beds and maybe raised beds. but it's not good for containers. And the reason for that is there's nothing in here to make it lighter, there's no time-release nutrients, and it's just not ideally suited for containers. Now what about garden soil? That's what it's labeled on the bag, and that's this right here. Now we're getting closer. It's lighter, and it has some of those slow-release nutrients, which are important in a container. But it's not engineered for containers. This is actually made for outdoor use. It's not quite light enough, so keep this outside. But what we do want is potting soil or container mix. And this is it right here. And you can see the difference. Look at those different textures and colors in here. Now that's designed to help make the soil really light for drainage and for root expansion in containers. And yet the other thing is, it also retains a lot of moisture. So it's the best of both worlds. And this is what you want. The other thing is it has those slow release nutrients. And in a container, you're going to be watering all the time, even with things that retain the moisture. But as you water, the nutrients are going to flow right through unless you have something in it that's time released. And that's why that's important to have. Now, if you're an organic gardener like me, well, you can buy products that are still organic and have some of those slow release nutrients in it. Or, worst case scenario, you just add them yourself. So let's talk a little bit more about the subject of fertilizer as it relates to container gardening. And it's not something that we think about as much anymore because quite often the fertilizer is already mixed into the bagged product, whether that's synthetic or organic, and it's slow release typically. Now the thing to keep in mind as we're gardening in containers, well, those containers tend to dry out much faster than if we're putting that plant directly into the ground or even a raised bed. And the only access these plants have to nutrients are what are in the container. So as we water, some of those nutrients are being leached out, at least those that aren't being taken up by the plant. But eventually, we may need to supplement the nutrients that were in the soil mix. Now, you've got options there. You can use a liquid concentrate or a dry granular product. I'm an organic gardener, so I like to use the organic products. The liquid or the granular is fine, but just be sure whatever you use, follow the application directions as they're stated on the packaging. At some point, I think we all find ourselves asking the same question. Just what plants do well in a container? Or conversely, what shouldn't I plant in a container? Well, the fact of the matter is just about everything does well in a container. Even dwarf and semi-dwarf fruit trees do exceptionally well. In fact, all fruit trees and vegetable plants do well, but the most important consideration is paying attention to the size of the root mass. For example, if you're growing carrots, you need to take into consideration the size of the taproot at maturity. So you'd want to have a container that's big enough to accommodate it at full growth. And some other plants that would do well in a large container like this, tomatoes and fennel. Now on the other hand, if you're growing microgreens or maybe spinach, mesclun mix, or even radishes, well, they only need a couple inches for them to be happy. So something like this would be perfect and there's no need for overkill. That's a good choice. Now when choosing your plants and seeds, read the descriptions and look for words like compact growth, dwarf, semi-dwarf, baby, or even great in containers. That tells you that the plant will not get too large, yet still produce well. From there, you can use your imagination to combine different textures, colors, and even different heights to give your container interest. Now here's a quick tip. You know, even if you're only interested in growing edibles, buy some flowers anyway and put them in the container with your plants or somewhere nearby in the garden. Because not only will it make everything look better, but more importantly, it'll attract pollinators, and that's always a good thing.